It's Ready Player Willie with a new character review. This time it's for Rhaldor, or Lardo, or who knows what we're going to call him, because there's been a bunch of translation differences, but seems like Rhaldor is the name that the global team has settled on. He's a brand new pugilist character, so he's very, very heavy on the strike damage type, which has been relatively unseen in the game so far, other than a couple sub-jobs and some popular characters. So really interesting character for a handful of reasons. We're going to get into it. Definitely unique in terms of what the abilities do, how his kit works, and how he works in the battlefield. So let's jump right in. So Rhaldor is a fire unit for the jobs of Pugilist, Paladin, and Thief. Again, these classes kind of round out some of his stats where Thief gives him a little bit of extra agility than normal, Paladin gives him some bulkiness you might otherwise lack, and Pugilist is obviously super unique, brand new just for him. The weapons, he wields Fists, which is underutilized weapon in the game. Really, we haven't had anything released. We got something new this week, though, with the Kaiser Knuckles. In terms of other equipment, hat, cloth, and accessories, so a little bit on the less bulky side with the cloth, depending on what you have, but he's got a bunch of defensive abilities, so he does still bring a lot of bulk. And then move of 3 and jump of 2. The jump is super important, just because this character's kit, the way he works in the battlefield, it's all about mobility, like almost entirely about mobility. We'll get to that in a second. In terms of weaknesses and strengths, 20% strength to ice, 10% to water, that's 10% weakness to water, pretty standard. To me, he does really well against a lot of the ice meta that we've seen for a while. Obviously, the dark meta was strong, but you know what I'm saying. Agrace has always remained strong. Gilgamesh has a spot. There's definitely a cast of characters that fire really needs to, step up and do their best to assert their dominance. I think that Rhaldor can finally contribute to doing it. I thought that maybe Mashri could. She didn't have as much of an impact as I had hoped. But I think he's one of the first pages to turning the next chapter. In terms of resistances, 20% to missile resist strength, and 15% strength to pierce, which is awesome because a lot of our newer characters, like Kain, like Nivlu, like Luartha, are those types. 15% innate weakness to magic, which you gotta have a weakness somewhere. That one, it's not a terrible weakness because it can be hedged with espers and vision cards, but it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. Let's put it that way. And then status ailments, 50% resist to confuse, which means you can't be confused basically. And same thing, I think that's slow, and 10% to disable. So some good stuff there. Getting into the stat overview though, in terms of luck, and again, remember, luck is what it determines your evasion essentially, and helps contribute to accuracy on the other side of things. Total luck, he's a little bit above average, which is nice. Could be better, but it's not bad. His agility, a little bit above average, which is great. So you can see I have you'll see I have these ranked top 10 in terms of their total evasion. And as we get to the end here, the long story short, he's not an evade unit. So his luck just isn't high enough to make that happen in terms of what he needs to be. And he doesn't have any passives that really boost it that much. He's got an agility boosting passive, but it's not enough. So long story short, not an evade unit. So sad, but that's okay. In terms of that luck stat, though, contributing to his accuracy, it's super important. You'll see dexterity-wise, he's about average. Thankfully, that above-average luck kind of rounds him out. All in all, he's still not horribly amazing in terms of regular accuracy. He's straight average, and I say that in the sense that the average accuracy is 140%, and he's right there at the 140%, but he has a passive that I highly recommend, a passive, we'll get to that in a second, which boosts his accuracy by 20. When it does so, he becomes a top 5 accurate unit in the game, URs, when you have that passive enabled. So very highly recommended for a whole bunch of reasons that we'll get to in a second, but accuracy-wise, he's not really hurting for that stat, provided you have the passive one. If you don't, you obviously have to gear for it. But what this also means is because of the lower dexterity, also has a lower crit rate overall. So he's not going to be hitting extremely hard for crit rate, but I think the Kaiser Knuckle has the ability to appreciate. And then finally, just off note, he has 12 and 8 defense, super important because he does have some other defensive abilities where his playstyle, and we're going to get to that right now, is right in the middle of the battlefield. Like balls to the wall, straight in the middle, right next to the person, as close as he can get. So he needs as much survivability as possible. He does bring a lot in his own kit. So getting into that, the passive abilities, almost all of these are great. Flurry Enhancement is the real shining star, though, this first one. it upgrades Flurry Counter, which is a counter ability of his. This is very unique to him. I don't think any other characters in the game have something like this. But this is also one that boosts that accuracy I was talking about of 20, which is just a super material amount. It's incredibly helpful. So this is almost a definite for me in almost all instances of his build. The other ones really depend on exactly what you want to do with them. So Holy Knight's Protection obviously is a little more defensive oriented, where he gets that HP boost and gets the extra defense. Warrior Spirit, more offensive boosted or offensive oriented, where you still get that same HP boost, but instead of defense, you get 24% attack. Thief Lore is awesome because that's the agility boosting one, so as well as the move boosting one. So in terms of him getting closer to enemies, which he's going to need to do, this one actually does have a really useful spot, and that agility will help him get more turns as the fight goes on. And in the broad scheme of things, he is probably the true definition of a brawler character. We've heard that term used, like, thrown around a lot with, like, Cecil and Delita, in just terms of how they like do well as the fight goes on. But this guy really does well as the fight goes on. So having that increased agility really does help in the long run of the fight. And then acquired AP is okay, but most of his AP skills are relatively cheap, so I don't know if you really need this per se. It obviously, out of all this list, if you're going to be having Flurry Enhancement on, I think this is the lowest priority. So let's get into what Flurry Counter is, though, that passive ability helps. These first two lines here, so it essentially upgrades it. So it upgrades its damage from 121%, the modifier, to 165%. That's actually very, very potent at 165. That's what most characters use as like a regular average ability. And then it also increases the chance to proc. So you go from a 30% chance of retaliating to a 50% chance to retaliating, which is incredibly useful. That half the hits you're going to take, he's going to punch them back for 165% modifier, which is huge. The only downside is it is limited to someone who's right next to him, but the hugely underrated part of this kit is this column right here, the hits. This is a double hit. The reason why this is so immensely powerful is that, you know, just in the RNG of how the fight goes on, it's not unheard of and probably going to happen more often than not, where he's going to counter someone who just hit him. So bang, bang, double hit. Then he gets his turn, and he essentially gets himself a third chain by getting another fist attack in there, which is going to absolutely blow the enemy up. So a really underrated part of this, despite the fact that it's also super potent and super often to proc. So really awesome ability. The other two are pretty standard. Paladin's Guard helps take reduced damage, but to me, he's already got enough bulk that he doesn't necessarily need it. And quick action's okay. But the agility, I don't know, these pale in comparison, particularly because in terms of offensive skills, he doesn't have a ton of them, so this is a big contributor to how his damage would normally influence the battle. So for the main job, this Retsetsu Strike is like a really critical bread and butter part of his kit for two reasons. One, it's really the only one that has range on it. So if you look at all these skills, it's the only one that has more than a range of like 1 or like diagonal. So that's hugely important. Number two, it moves him to the panel. So when we talk about like leapfrogging around the battlefield, making sure you're always in range of an opponent, this one is supremely critical to making that happen. The other ones, Iron Body Stance is amazing, or increased defense by 15. So you go from 12 to 27, and then if you have the passive on, it's even higher. So awesome ability here to start the fight. Shura's Pummel is amazing. Human Killer at 25% on it. For the modifier, a good amount of damage. Again, you can see this 170%. That's basically what the Flurry Counter is. So it's Flurry Counter is a strong attack. This one is too, because it is technically hits 2 enemies at once on the diagonal. And then Demon Purger. This is one of those ones where is pro him being in the brawl, where the modifier increases by 75% if you've taken, I think the way they've described it, like a certain number of hits up to 5. I think the wording on this is technically incorrect, and the in-game wording is more correct. I really should have done that research before I looked at this, but I'll see if I can put it in the comments. Either way, this is what we talk about, him being oriented for brawl. He's got 2 attacks like this, one in the main job, one in the sub job, where the modifier gets an increase the more times he's taking damage. And then finally, Pugilistic Mastery. This one is good for him for the defensive penetration, where it gives him 20% penetration. He already has 20% in his master ability, so that'll bump him up to 40, which is pretty important. There's probably not a lot of ally strike units, because if you think about the monk genre, it's really what, Ziza, and then for main job, and then sub jobs it's what, Glaciella, Cecil, and then Lucia. So like unless you're using them in the monk sub job, this pugilistic mastery probably doesn't get the same benefit that you've seen some of the other similar attacks on something like aimed fire with the gunners, where because there's so many missile users, that AoE buff really can help your teammates. This one remains to be seen. That being said, moving on to the sub job, this one's not bad. To me, breathing technique is okay. I like that he has an ability to restore himself, but here's the big kicker. One thing you've noticed so far in almost all these attacks, none of them have status effects in them. So to me, if I'm equipping him with faith, I probably want to go lower on the faith. And unless you're like intentionally giving him the Ziza bells, to me, the lower the faith, the better. Because not only does he already have 15% weakness to magic, but high faith just does nothing for him other than giving himself some more HP if he gets healed. So to me, my build personally, I'd build him more for defense and HP, try to round out the magic weakness, and then just go low on the faith side and really just abandon this breathing technique ability. But the Spirit Breaker is a nice one where, again, the wording of this I think is completely incorrect, but it's something along the lines of if you take up to 5 attacks, he will increase the modifier by certain amounts. And it is also an attack break, so in terms of nerfing the enemy attacks, this is very important and is one of his only other ranged abilities. So I do like the sub job, but you're really limited to like 1 attack on this sub job. So I'm not over the moon for it, but it's not bad. The next one though, Paladin, this is the one that I really personally prefer him for. So Blade Bash is fine. The only thing with the sub job, I wouldn't have any of these offensive abilities turned on because what makes him shine is the whole strike ability, where people can't reliably resist against it. So yeah, so just like regular Ash slash damage, that's going to get washed out in the whole grand scheme of things. But out of all these abilities, I do think Saintly Wall is the one that, to me, puts him at a premium. The ability to reduce the physical damage for 3 times by 50%. When you talk about the trade-offs here, like if you're trading off Spirit Breaker between Saintly Wall, again, it's kind of, are you going for more that defensive build, that offensive build, or kind of a hybrid, where, you know, what do you want to give up? To me, I really like this job just for the Saintly Wall, if not also the Sentinel, where increased defense by 45 for 1 turn. The decrease in evasion, it really doesn't hurt him because he's not an evade unit anyway, like we mentioned. So the ability to pop Sentinel and then move into the midst of the battlefield and like just take almost any damage that comes your way that's physical, really important part. So to me, the Paladin sub job is really what's going to make him be as optimally brawl as possible. And then finally, the Thief, again, this is one of those classes, I think it's here for the stats to give him extra agility and you know, the other things that the Thief sub-job brings. But overall, like, this does have potential use in raids and whatnot, where he does have Steal Time. And what was the other one here? I guess that's it. Steal Vision 2 to help decrease accuracy. So, like, those have their spots in very specific niche situations, but I don't think you're using this in the majority of any kind of PvP content. This is more for very strategic, you know, turn-based things. In terms of the other stats and info, the Limit Burst, I like it. It's, again, one of the only ranged things he has, so I particularly like it for that reason. 43 AP is 43 AP is relatively cheap. Damage-wise, it's average. The only thing that I don't really love about it, the decrease of strike resistance, kind of a selfish ability where it only affects him. There are some other limit bursts that, you know, decrease defense, do status effects. To me, the strike resistance will help him hit harder by, you know, imperiling those enemies. But unless you're running multiple monks, he's really the only one that takes advantage of it. So I do like it because it is another ranged DPS ability in his kit. But the broad scheme of things, probably not the greatest thing that's going to turn the tide for you. The TMR is kind of an interesting one because to me, the stats on this TMR are incredible. The ability, I don't know if he needs. It's kind of an odd one. So 348 HP is amazing. Gives some extra attack, another 8 defense, 10 accuracy, and then the ability is to increase accuracy by up to 30 if you haven't maxed, and increase the move by 1 for 3 turns. So the only reason why I don't really love this TMR, the ability seems kind of odd for me on him, where I guess sure, if you don't have that passive ability equipped and you need accuracy, this is going to help. But even then, if you consider like the strategy of what he is, he's a brawl character, right? So this idea that you're going to increase accuracy and move for only 3 turns, I mean, obviously it's going to help him cross the battlefield, and that's really all he needs to do, but I just feel like there's other TMRs that probably have more impactful abilities to start the team fight. Stat-wise, though, it's definitely amazing, so if you're just doing it to, like, bulk him up and add some stats, even if you don't use the TMR skill, it's pretty fucking amazing, so I'll leave that there. And then Master Ability, this is another one of those party buffs, so increase HP for Fire Rally, 10%, fire attack on the modifier by 15, and then increase his own defensive penetration by 20, which is hugely important for any kind of DPS character. Yeah, so that's why I think he's going to work well with a lot of other fire units. Where if you put him with like Luartha or Mashari, who are popular potential missile users, you got a lot going for you. The one thing I did want to mention that I sort of glossed over, he does have a hate generating attack with the Taunting Blade. So theoretically, he could be a tank because he is bulky with defense, does have HP, is on the faster side of things, so he could be a faster tank for you. But honestly, that's not what makes him good. What makes him good is the strike damage, and then just what he does in terms of as the fight ramps up, the DPS output. Taunting Blade it's just a regular ass slash attack, and I just think there's better tanks to do that job. So I'll leave that there. It's at least an option, but probably not something you want to put on until I have him use T1 or T2. Vision card synergies, though, the one thing about this character, and this is more a reflection of Strike overall, there's not a lot of vision cards or espers to really invest in a Strike unit. And I say that in the purest sense that Rhaldor is a pack mule character, meaning the vision card you're going to put on him is likely one that's going to help the whole team, not just him. I looked at what's coming out in JP. There is no like Strike up vision card or physical fire up. I mean, there's fire attack up, but there's just not a lot of vision cards that enhance him. There are two that I think particularly stand out. Fenrir I like a lot because it adds that extra dexterity, so more accuracy if you don't already have it. 4 extra agility to really boost him up in the speed category. Extra HP of 10% for survivability, but then more than anything, the magic resist. So this will completely eradicate his magic weakness and give him a 5% positive resistance, which to me is very important in terms of rounding him out as a character. Not to mention, it is also going to help all your rest of your teammates 20% magic resistance. So if you're using him with like Mashari already has 20% innate magic resistance. This card is going to put her at 40. Not to mention both of them are going to increase each other's fire attack and increase each other's HP. So that's where I really see the synergy in this card. The next one is Ifrit, obviously increased fire attack for himself and party attack by 50%. Hugely important in terms of packing a punch. I like this card a lot. The third one, this is not one you would put on him. I just have it here as a special mention. It's the Malboro card. To my knowledge, this is the only card that has an increase of strike attack, and it's only at 15. The only thing that I'm not a big fan of in this card, it's number 1, magic oriented, so you need to put this on a magic user that's into your comp. And then 2, the unit effect, the confusion resist. It's okay. It's not great. So this card overall, if you're really investing a lot into a monk team, maybe this has a place. But even then, if it's a monk team, none of them are going to use a magic card unless you're trying to make regular old ass light Mashari work, because she technically has a monk sub job and would benefit from magic. Not worth wasting any more time on it though. In terms of Esper synergies, boy, everything, all of them are good. The reason why I say that, not all of them, most of them are good. The reason I say that, none of them in particular have a strike attack up. So again, nothing to invest in him. To me, all of these are purely based upon number 1, how much agility you want to give him, and then number 2, what resistances you want to build him for. So if you are trying to stack a bunch of magic resist on him to round out that weakness and really compete with Sakura, who might become more prevalently in the meta right now, yeah, bulk him up for that. If you think that there's going to be a lot more in terms of physical attackers, you want to bulk defense, sure, throw Golem in it or Death Machine on him and bulk up that defense because he's already pretty speedy. He's not going to lose a lot with the lower agility those characters have. And then straight up, some of them have attack boosts. So if you're looking at something like Red Chocobo or even Leviathan, they both have increased attack of 15%. So even Leviathan for the ice resist, if you want to really turn the tide in that matchup, it's literally subjective to whatever you want to do. So I have them all here, and then potentially some MR Espers too, but it's whatever you see fit. And then equipment synergies, finally, I'm really going over the fist. So this is the Kaiser Knuckle that just came out this week. To me, the Assault is not a bad version of this at 180 attack, but to me, the crit build is really where it's at. If you look at the trade-off in attack, it's what, 26 attack? That's not a hugely material amount of stats, whereas 25 added to your total crit is huge because he doesn't have any whatsoever. So being able to build this for the crit, not to mention it has 9 accuracy, I think it's almost objectively better. It even has more HP. I don't know, I don't think 26 attack is worth going for Assault, me personally. Not to mention you're probably gonna have to pump in a lot more seals to max out that attack stat to do so. And then the other one is the Mithril Claws. This one's honestly not a bad trade-off. To me, you are sacrificing a fair amount of the stats but you might already have it because it's such an old item that you don't have to invest in building a brand new fist. But either way, both viable weapons for him. And I'm really going to stop there because the rest of the equipment is, again, totally subjective for the comp you're going against. He wears cloth, so hypothetically, if you're going against missile users, you get the platinum robe. If you're going against slash users, there's feeds Lacerna. If you're going against the magic comps, you got smart coat. If you want to give him some accessories instead, like, you could do that too. So to me, there's too many options right now because there isn't a specific meta to gear against. It's hard for me to actually give a recommendation on what's best because it's completely subjective to not only what you're using already for like espers and vision cards, but who you're actually fighting against. In a nutshell, though, I think he's a really interesting character because, if you've seen, he's super unique to what he wants to do. He really wants to like hop around the battlefield using his movement ability to really get up close and strike people in the face and really stay one square away from them. I could see why there are a fair amount of ranged abilities in the game that you're not always going to get someone right next to you attacking, so that counter ability doesn't always get procced per se, where you have a lot of attacks that can hit from 2 squares away. But even still, I think offensively he does bring enough firepower because he's got up to 40% defense penetration. He does have that increased modifier on his abilities as the fight goes on and he gets attacked more. And then overall, I think being the fire element and what he can bring to new parties is super interesting. So I like that they introduced him a lot, to be honest. I have myself, for now, I'm building him up, and I will be practicing more with the AI soon. But so far, from what I've seen, the AI is pretty smart. I know there's been some issues with Sakura for the meantime in terms of like how she buffs and how she moves. But like Rhaldor is kind of like right out of the gate, like really, really smart with how he uses a lot of his AI, where he does like a defense ability first, and then he'll move forward and he'll just start smacking people. So yeah, and then the last thing I'll say, just in terms of like a yay or nay recommendation, I never ever do this in my reviews of the character. I honestly am not sure how hard people should pull for him right now with Final Fantasy X so close on the horizon. I'm not going to say don't pull for him. I obviously have him, and thousands, if not millions, of other people do too. But we're now in the phase of the game where Visior is at an actual like premium because time is really ticking down for when that limited event comes, and just how powerful those characters are. Like, to me, if you're really going ham on pulling Yuna or Tidus, and you're going to have, dozens of pulls, there's probably a chance you're going to get Rhaldor in the drops. It's just, it's a matter of how much Viz do you want to invest right now, making sure you have enough for when they drop. So he's kind of coming at an interesting time, and to me, probably will have some good relative strength for the short term, but in terms of lasting power and staying power, I think it remains to be seen how it shakes out, because Yuna does bring in a really, really harsh magic meta, which you got to put some resources in him to hedge against. But anyways, have fun if you do pull this character. Good luck if you're fighting against him. Obviously it's a new state of the game right now with Kain being phased out slowly, so I'm really excited to see what kind of characters will come out of the woodwork and what kind of new interactions are going to happen. But anyways, good luck pulling. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, point out any corrections, leave comments and questions, and looking forward to doing the next one, everybody. So take care.